Before we start the video, comment where you are watching from, the time you are watching, and which story you like. I never thought I'd be afraid of Christmas decorations, but that was before I took the night guard job at Wonderland Mall. My name's Robert Martinez, and like most people these days, I was desperate for work. When I saw the ad for a night security guard position, I figured it would be easy money. I mean, who would want to break into an abandoned mall, right? Especially one that's been closed for almost 5 years. The mall manager, Mr. Peterson, barely looked at my application before hiring me. He was a thin man with gray hair who kept checking his watch during our whole interview. "Just keep an eye on things from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., he said, handing me a ring of keys that must have weighed 2 pounds. The mall might be empty, but we still have valuable stuff inside. And whatever you do, don't mess with the Christmas display in the central court. It's historical property." On my first night, I realized why they were paying above minimum wage for this job. Wonderland Mall wasn't just empty, it was creepy. My footsteps echoed through dark corridors lined with empty storefronts. Their metal gates rolled down like closed eyes. The air smelled musty, like old carpet and dust, with a weird hint of peppermint that seemed to follow me around. The central court was the worst part. They'd left up this massive Christmas display from when the mall closed, a winter wonderland scene with fake snow, mechanical reindeer, and a big fancy chair where Mall Santa used to sit. The chair was empty now, but sometimes, when I walked past, I could have sworn it rocked slightly, like someone had just gotten up. I tried to focus on my regular patrols, checking doors and keeping an eye on the security cameras in my little office. But every night, around midnight, the cameras would get fuzzy for a few seconds. Mr. Peterson said it was just old equipment, but I wasn't so sure, especially after I started noticing little changes in that Christmas display. One night I was absolutely certain a reindeer had turned its head to watch me walk by. The next night, the fake snow seemed to have shifted, showing fresh footprints that were way too small to be mine. And the candy canes. I could have sworn there were 12 of them when I started my shift, but only 11 when I counted them later. That's when I decided to do some digging into the mall's history. I never expected to find what I did, and now I wish I could forget it all. But I guess I should tell you what happened, from the beginning to the end. Maybe then you'll understand why I can't look at Christmas decorations the same way anymore. Just remember, sometimes the cheerful music and twinkling lights aren't there to spread joy. Sometimes they're there to hide something much darker. After that first week, I started bringing a thermos of coffee and extra batteries for my flashlight. The batteries were the weird part. They kept dying way too fast, especially around midnight. One minute I'd have a bright beam, and the next it would start flickering like a cheap Halloween decoration. I remember the night things got really strange. It was December 13th, and the mall felt colder than usual. I was doing my usual round, checking the locks on the department store doors, when I heard music. Not the tinny recorded Christmas songs that sometimes played from old speakers. This was different. It sounded like a music box playing Silent Night, soft and clear. I followed the sound to the Christmas display. The central court was dark except for a single light that shouldn't have been working. It was shining right on Santa's empty chair. As I got closer, the music stopped. That's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The visitor logbook from the old Santa photo booth was sitting open on the chair. I know it hadn't been there earlier during my first round. My hands were shaking as I picked up the book. It was heavy, with a red leather cover that felt ice cold to the touch. Inside were thousands of names, kids who'd taken pictures with Mall Santa back in the 80s. But some names had little stars drawn next to them in faded red ink. I took the book back to my security office to look closer. That's when the cameras started acting up again. Every screen went fuzzy at exactly midnight, just like usual. But this time, when they came back on, I saw something that made my heart stop. A small figure in a red and green sweater walked across the central court. The image was blurry, but I could tell it was a child. I grabbed my flashlight and ran out there, but found nothing, just the empty court and that creepy Santa chair. The book was back on the chair too, even though I was sure I'd left it in my office. It was open to a page from December 1985, and one name with a star caught my eye. Tommy Wilson, last to see Santa. The next morning, I showed up early to talk to the cleaning lady, Mrs. Chen. She'd worked at the mall since it opened. "Mrs. Chen," I asked, trying to sound casual, "do you remember a kid named Tommy Wilson?" She stopped mopping and gave me a look that made my stomach drop. "You've been looking at that old book, haven't you?" she whispered. "Some things are better left alone, Robert, especially in this place." I should have listened to her, but I couldn't. Not after what I found when I searched for Tommy Wilson's name online that evening. The headline from December 23, 1985, still gives me nightmares. "Local boy missing after mall visit. Last seen at Wonderland Santa display." And Tommy wasn't the only one with a star next to his name. I spent my break time at the public library, looking through old newspapers on their computer. Every kid with a star next to their name in that book had gone missing. 5 children in total, all during Christmas season of 1985. The police never found them. The mall's old Santa that year was a man named Frank Miller. According to the articles, he'd worked there for 10 years, and kids loved him. But after Tommy Wilson disappeared, Frank stopped showing up for work. 3 days later, they found his Santa suit in the mall's maintenance room, covered in glitter and pine needles. Frank was gone too, his apartment empty, his car still in the mall parking lot. I knew I should have quit right then, but something about those missing kids kept pulling at me. Maybe it was because I had a little sister their age, or maybe it was the way their smiling faces looked in those old newspaper photos. They deserved answers, even after all these years. That night at work, things got worse. I was checking the security cameras when I noticed the temperature dropping. My breath came out in white puffs, and the coffee in my thermos turned to ice. Then the cameras went static again, but this time they showed something different when they came back on. Kids were walking through the mall, not just one, but 5 of them, holding hands in a line. They were heading toward the Christmas display, but they didn't look right. They seemed to flicker like old TV pictures, and I could see the store windows right through them. I grabbed my phone to record it, but it was dead, even though I just charged it. My flashlight died too, leaving me in the dark with just the glow from the security screens. I watched as the kids reached the Santa chair. They stood in a circle around it, and then they all turned to look directly at the camera. That's when I heard the music box again, playing Silent Night. But this time it was coming from right behind me. I spun around, heart pounding. There on my desk was an old mall employee badge. It showed a man with a big white beard and kind eyes, wearing a Santa hat. The name read Frank Miller, and someone had drawn a tiny star next to it in red ink. With shaking hands, I picked up my office phone to call Mr. Peterson. It took him 3 rings to answer. "Mr. Peterson, I need to ask you something about Frank Miller." "Don't." His voice was different now, no longer bored, but scared. "Listen to me carefully, Robert. Whatever you've found, whatever you've seen, forget about it. Some doors shouldn't be opened. And if you hear those music boxes playing," he paused, and I could hear him swallowing hard. "Just remember, they only play for children." "What do you mean?" I asked. But all I heard was a click as he hung up. I looked back at the security screens. The kids were gone, but the Santa chair was rocking slowly back and forth. And next to it, drawn in the fake snow, was a message. "Help us, please." The next few nights were quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual creaks and groans of the old mall seemed muted, like everything was holding its breath. I knew I should quit, but those kids' faces haunted me. Someone had to help them. I started bringing a notepad to work, writing down everything strange I noticed. The Christmas display changed a little each night. Candy canes would move, ornaments would switch colors, and sometimes I'd find small footprints in the fake snow. But it wasn't until December 20th that I found something that made everything click. I was checking behind the big Christmas tree when my flashlight caught something metallic. Hidden under years of dust was a small door, barely bigger than a shoebox. The metal was painted with faded candy canes and snowflakes, and had "Wonderland Mall Christmas Magic" written across it in fancy letters. Inside, I found an old folder filled with yellowed papers. They were contracts, dozens of them, between the mall and a company called Festive Futures. The company had promised to make Wonderland Mall the most magical Christmas shopping destination in the state. The last page made my blood run cold. It said, "Payment due. The joy of 5 pure souls, freely given." That night, everything changed. At exactly midnight, all the lights in the mall turned on. Christmas music blasted from every speaker, not the usual carols, but weird, twisted versions that made my skin crawl. The mechanical reindeer moved on their own, their eyes glowing red. I ran to my office and grabbed the logbook, flipping to December 1985. Now I understood what the stars meant. 5 kids had given their joy to Santa, to Frank Miller, not knowing what it really meant. They'd been so excited to share their Christmas wishes that they'd freely given their happiness away. And the mall had taken it, twisted it, used it to draw in more shoppers with its magical Christmas spirit. The temperature dropped so fast, the windows frosted over. In the security cameras, I watched the 5 ghost children appear again, but this time they weren't alone. A tall figure in a Santa suit was following them, moving in jerky, unnatural ways. It wasn't Frank Miller, not anymore. Whatever the mall had turned him into was something else entirely. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. Through the static, I heard children laughing, then crying. A deep voice started speaking, not through the radio, but in my head. They all wanted to help make Christmas magic. Such wonderful, giving children. And now you're here to help too, aren't you, Robert? I slammed the radio down, but it didn't matter. The laughter was getting closer, and it didn't sound like children anymore. I had 4 days until Christmas Eve. 4 days to figure out how to free these kids, or I had a feeling I'd be the next star in that logbook. Looking at the security screens, I saw the Santa figure turn its head and stare directly at the camera. It raised one hand and waved, fingers moving like puppet strings. Then it pointed to the ground, where new words were appearing in the fake snow. "Your turn to make Christmas magic, Robert. No turning back now." I called in sick the next day and spent hours at the library, reading everything I could find about Festive Futures. The company had worked with lots of malls in the 1980s, promising to boost their Christmas sales. Every mall they worked with had record profits that year, and every single one later shut down after kids went missing. When I got to work that night, I found something new in my office. An old VHS tape labeled Santa Photos 1985. I didn't even know the ancient TV in my office still worked, but when I pushed the tape in, it started playing right away. The video showed kids sitting on Santa's lap, Frank Miller's lap. At first, everything looked normal, but as I watched, I noticed how he would lean down and whisper something in each child's ear. The kids with stars in the logbook all had the same reaction. Their eyes would get wide, they'd nod excitedly, and then their smiles would fade just a little, like a light dimming. The tape started getting fuzzy, but through the static, I heard Frank's voice. "Just share a little bit of your Christmas joy with me. Help make the mall magical for everyone. That's what good children do, right?" Suddenly, the TV shut off, and I heard jingling bells behind me. When I turned around, the ghost children were there, standing in my office doorway. They looked solid now, more real than before. I could see their 80s clothes, their scared faces. One of them, a little boy I recognized as Tommy Wilson, stepped forward. He said we were helping. Tommy's voice was like a whisper in my head. But he took too much. The mall took all of it, and now we can't leave. "How can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaking. Another child, a girl with pigtails, pointed at the Christmas display through my office window. "The music boxes," she said. He put our joy in the music boxes, but they only open on Christmas Eve. The lights flickered, and I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. The children vanished just as I saw the twisted Santa figure walk past my office. It was dragging something that looked like an empty red sack. The temperature dropped again, and words started appearing on my office window, written by an invisible finger in the frost. 5 music boxes. 5 children's joy. 1 night to set them free. But fail, and your joy joins our collection. My radio crackled again, and through the static, I heard 5 music boxes playing Silent Night, each slightly out of tune, creating a horrible discord. The sound made my head hurt and my vision blur. When it stopped, I found a new note on my desk, written in glittery red ink. 3 days until Christmas Eve, Robert. Will you be naughty or nice? I looked at my reflection in the window and saw something that made me stumble backward. For just a second, a red star was glowing next to my face, getting brighter with each passing second. I was running out of time. The next night, I found something that changed everything. The old security guard's logbook, stuffed behind a filing cabinet. The pages were crumpled and coffee-stained, but what I read made my hands shake. December 21st, 1985. Something's wrong with Santa. The kids come out of his line different, quieter. Their parents don't notice, but I do. Found weird music boxes in his bag today. He said, "They're for storing Christmas wishes." I don't believe him. December 22nd, 1985. Kids are missing. Frank's acting strange. Keeps talking about collecting joy and feeding them all. The Christmas display moves at night. I hear music boxes playing, but can't find them. December 23rd, 1985. I know where the music boxes are hidden now. One in the star on top of the tree. One inside the biggest wrapped present. One in the mechanical reindeer's chest. One behind the fireplace backdrop. One in Santa's chair. But don't touch them until midnight on Christmas Eve. That's when they're weakest. December 24th, 1985. This is my last entry. If you're reading this, you're the new guard. I'm going to try to free them tonight. If I don't make it, remember, the boxes only open to the sound of children laughing. All 5 must be opened at exactly midnight. Don't let Santa see you. And whatever you do, don't listen to the mall's promises. The last page was torn, with just 2 words written in shaky letters. I'm sorry. Just then, my phone rang, making me jump. It was Mrs. Chen, the cleaning lady. "Robert, I saw your car outside. Listen carefully," she whispered. "I was here that Christmas Eve. I saw what happened to the old guard. He almost got all the boxes open, but the mall. It offered him something, his dead wife back. He hesitated for just 1 second, and that's all it took. The mall took him too." "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Because I tried to help him, but I was too scared to finish what he started. The mall shows you what you want most. Don't look at it. Don't listen. Just get those children out." The call cut off suddenly. The office got cold again, and in the frost on my window, new words appeared. "What do you want most, Robert? A better job? More money? Your dad back from the war?" I stared at the words, my heart pounding. How did it know about my dad? The radio switched on by itself, playing Christmas music. But between the songs, I heard a familiar voice, my father's voice calling my name. I closed my eyes tight and covered my ears. "It's not real," I whispered. "It's not him." When I opened my eyes, the ghost children stood before me again. Tommy spoke. "2 more nights, Robert, but be careful. The mall knows you're trying to help us now, and it doesn't play fair." They vanished, leaving behind 5 small handprints on my desk. As I watched, a red star appeared above each one, glowing brighter and brighter until I had to look away. The mall was getting stronger. Christmas Eve was getting closer, and I still didn't know if I was brave enough to face what was coming. Christmas Eve arrived cold and snowy. I got to work early, at 10 p.m., with a backpack full of supplies. extra flashlights, batteries, and a small recorder that played children's laughter I'd downloaded from the internet. My hands were sweating despite the cold as I checked my watch. 2 hours until midnight. The mall felt different tonight. The air smelled like peppermint and burning wood, even though there wasn't a fireplace anywhere. The Christmas lights were all on, twinkling in patterns that made my eyes hurt, and the Christmas music playing through the speakers kept changing to songs I'd never heard before. Songs about collecting joy and keeping promises to the mall. I walked to each hiding spot the old guard had written about, marking them on a small map. The star on the tree glowed brighter when I got close, and I could hear a faint tinkling from inside it. The big present under the tree shifted slightly when I passed by. Inside the mechanical reindeer, something was ticking like a clock. Behind the fireplace backdrop, I heard a child humming. And Santa's chair. It rocked back and forth without stopping, like someone invisible was sitting in it. At 11:30, the ghost children appeared. They looked more solid than ever, almost real enough to touch. Tommy spoke first. "Be careful. The mall knows what you're planning. It's going to try to stop you." "How?" I asked, my voice shaking. Before they could answer, all the lights went out. In the darkness, I heard heavy footsteps and the jingling of bells. The twisted Santa was coming, and this time, it was between me and the exit. "Robert Martinez," a deep voice called out. It sounded like it was coming through an old radio with bad reception. Such a kind boy, wanting to help these children. But think about what the mall could do for you instead. The emergency exit signs started flickering, and in their red glow, I saw him. The Santa suit was torn and stained, the beard matted and dirty. But worst of all were his eyes. They glowed like red stars, just like the ones in the logbook. "Your father could come home," Santa said, taking a step closer. "We could change the past, make it so he never went to war. Isn't that worth more than these children? They've been here so long already." I heard my dad's voice again, calling me from somewhere in the dark mall. It sounded so real, so close. Part of me wanted to run toward it, to forget about everything else. But then I felt a small, cold hand slip into mine. Looking down, I saw the ghost girl with pigtails holding my hand. She didn't speak, but her eyes begged me not to give up. That's when the mall's front doors slammed shut by themselves. All the exits locked with loud click. The security screens in my office showed halls that twisted and changed, like the mall was turning into a maze. My watch read 11:45, 15 minutes until midnight. I was trapped inside with a monster wearing a Santa suit, 5 ghost children who needed my help, and a mall that would do anything to keep its Christmas magic. And somewhere in the darkness, 5 music boxes waited to be opened. The ghost children scattered into the darkness, but I could still hear them whispering, "Hurry, we'll try to distract." I pulled out my map and flashlight. The closest music box was in the star on top of the tree. As I ran toward it, chairs from the food court started sliding across the floor by themselves, blocking my path. The twisted Santa laughed, a horrible sound like breaking glass. "1 minute wasted," he called out. "How many more until you give up?" I jumped over the chairs and reached the tree. The star was ice cold when I grabbed it, and something inside played a few notes of Silent Night, but it wouldn't open. Then I remembered, they only opened to the sound of children laughing. My hands shaking, I pulled out my recorder and pressed play. Children's laughter filled the air, and the star cracked open. Inside was a tiny golden music box. 1 down, 4 to go. Suddenly, the mall's speakers crackled. "Robert, son, please help me." It was Dad's voice again, sounding scared. "I'm lost in here somewhere." My heart felt like it was being squeezed. I knew it wasn't real, but it sounded so much like it. "Don't listen." Tommy's ghost appeared next to me. "It's how the mall tricks people. Run to the gift. We'll keep Santa busy." I ran to the big wrapped present while the ghost children threw Christmas ornaments at the twisted Santa. The present tried to slide away from me, but I grabbed it and played the recording again. The second music box fell into my hand. 11:54 p.m. 6 minutes left. The mechanical reindeer was next. As I reached for it, The mall tried one last trick, all around me. The walls filled with pictures. Pictures of my dad coming home, of us being a family again. My eyes burned with tears, but I forced myself to look away. The mall lies, I whispered to myself. Keep going. The reindeer's chest opened to the sound of laughter. 3 boxes now. The fireplace backdrop was falling apart when I reached it, but the 4th music box was there. By now, the twisted Santa was getting closer, shoving aside everything the ghost children threw at it. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes. Only Santa's chair was left. But as I ran toward it, the floor cracked open between me and the chair, showing a deep darkness below. The mall was breaking apart, trying to stop. It's over, the twisted Santa said, now right behind me. The mall always wins, but he was wrong, because at that moment, something amazing happened. All 5 ghost children appeared, holding hands in a circle around me. And they did something they hadn't done in almost 40 years. They laughed, real laughter, happy and bright and full of hope. The sound echoed through the mall like sunshine breaking through clouds. Santa's chair shook, and the last music box flew into my hand. Midnight struck. I held all 5 boxes as the children's laughter grew louder. The twisted Santa screamed, his red eyes flickering out. The mall around us groaned and creaked. Open them! Tommy shouted. All at once, I opened all 5 music boxes together. Golden light poured out, along with the purest version of Silent Night I'd ever heard. The ghost children started to glow, their sad smiles turning to real ones. Thank you, they said together, their voices getting fainter. We can go home. The twisted Santa melted away like old snow. The mall's walls began to crack. Decades of dark Christmas magic finally break, and in the golden light, I saw 5 children, finally free, fade away like stars at dawn. I ran outside just as the mall started collapsing. By morning, it was nothing but rubble. They found Frank Miller's body in the basement, along with evidence that finally solved the missing children case. The families could finally have closure. In the ruins, they only found one thing still intact. 5 tiny music boxes, now silent forever. I still work as a night guard, but at a different place now, a small museum downtown. Sometimes people ask me about the Wonderland Mall collapse, but I keep the real story to myself. Who would believe it anyway? The police found letters Frank Miller had written, hidden in the mall's basement. He wrote about how the mall owners pressured him to make Christmas more magical so they could make more money. He didn't know what he was getting into until it was too late. The mall's dark magic had changed him, just like it almost changed me. Mrs. Chen retired after the mall collapsed. Before she left town, she gave me something, a small photo she'd kept all these years. It showed 5 happy kids, sitting with a kind-looking Santa, taken just minutes before everything went wrong. On the back, she'd written, "Sometimes the bravest thing is choosing to help others instead of yourself." I still hear my dad's voice sometimes in my dreams, calling me like the mall made me hear that night. It hurts, but I know I made the right choice. Those kids needed to go home more than I needed my wish to come true. Last Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year later, I drove past the empty lot where the mall used to be. For a second, I thought I saw 5 children playing in the snow. Their laughter carried on the winter wind. But when I looked again, there was just fresh snow, unmarked and peaceful. I keep one small reminder of that night. An empty candy cane wrapper from the Christmas display. Not to remember the fear or the sadness, but to remember that sometimes the most important gifts we can give aren't the ones that come wrapped in pretty paper. Sometimes they're the choices we make to help others, even when it's hard. Now every Christmas, I hang 5 simple ornaments on my tree, one for each child. And sometimes, very faintly, I think I hear the pure, sweet notes of Silent Night playing from somewhere far away. But this time, it sounds like it should, full of peace, hope, and real Christmas joy. The kind that can't be bottled up in a music box or used to make money. The kind that reminds us what Christmas is really about, helping others, being brave, and keeping hope alive, even in the darkest places. And if you're ever in a mall at Christmas time and hear a music box playing Silent Night, Just remember, real Christmas magic isn't something you can buy it's something you carry in your heart and share by helping others find their way home. I never thought a box of Christmas ornaments would change my life forever. But that's exactly what happened last December, just when I was starting to think my days of adventure were long behind me. I'm Margaret Blackwood, and I've been running Blackwood Antiques on Pine Street for over 30 years now. Most days I sit in my cozy little shop surrounded by old treasures and memories that other people don't want anymore. Sometimes I talk to the items, silly as that sounds. When you've been alone as long as I have, even teacups and old mirrors start to feel like friends. It was a cold Tuesday morning when the package arrived. No return address, just my name and shop address written in curly handwriting that reminded me of the letters my grandmother used to write. The brown paper wrapping crinkled under my fingers as I carried it to my workbench in the back room. Well, let's see what we have here, I said to myself, carefully unwrapping the package. Inside was an old wooden box, dark with age and smooth from years of handling. When I lifted the lid, I gasped. Nestled in faded red velvet were 12 of the most beautiful Christmas ornaments I'd ever seen. They were made of mercury glass, that old silvery material that catches light like moonlight on water. Each one was perfectly preserved, not a crack or scratch in sight. That alone made me suspicious. Mercury glass is fragile, and finding even one piece in perfect condition is rare. Finding 12? That was impossible. But it wasn't just their condition that caught my eye. Each ornament showed a different scene, like tiny snow globes without the snow. One had a Christmas tree being decorated, another showed a grand dining room with a feast laid out. There were dancers in ball gowns, children opening presents, carolers by a lamppost, each scene more detailed than the last. I picked up the ornament with the Christmas tree scene to examine it more closely. That's when I saw something that made my hands shake. The tiny figure hanging an ornament on the tree moved. Not like a reflection or a trick of the light, it actually turned its head and looked at me. I nearly dropped the ornament but managed to set it down gently. I must be seeing things, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. When I looked again, the figure was frozen in place, just like it should be. But I knew what I'd seen. After 3 decades of handling antiques, you develop a sense for things that are different, special, sometimes dangerous. These ornaments were definitely special, and my gut told me they might be dangerous too. I spent the rest of the morning searching online for any mention of similar ornaments. It took hours, but finally, I found something. A small article about a Christmas Eve massacre at Thornfield Manor in 1888. The article mentioned 12 unique mercury glass ornaments that disappeared after that horrible night. Just as I finished reading, the shop's bell rang. I hurried to the front, expecting a customer, but no one was there. Instead, on the welcome mat, sat a single ornament, number 13. My heart pounding, I picked it up. Unlike the others, this one was completely dark inside, like a piece of night had been trapped in the glass. As I held it, I swear I heard whispers, too quiet to understand, but too clear to ignore. I knew I should have been scared. Maybe I should have packed everything up and shipped it far away. But there's something that happens when you get to my age. You start to realize that the scary things might be your last chance at doing something important, something that matters. So instead of running, I took the 13th ornament to my workbench and placed it with the others. Then I did what I always do when I'm worried. I made a cup of tea and started taking notes. I had no idea then that I was starting the strangest and most important investigation of my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ornament seemed to call to me from my shop downstairs. I live in a small apartment above my store, and every creak of the old building made me wonder if something was happening below. At midnight, I gave up trying to sleep and went down to the shop, still in my robe and slippers. The moonlight coming through the front window made the ornaments shine like stars. I picked up the first ornament again, the one with the Christmas tree. This time, I wasn't imagining things. The tiny figure inside definitely moved. It turned toward me, and suddenly the room around me disappeared. I was standing in a grand living room decorated for Christmas. The air smelled like pine needles and cinnamon. A woman in a long dress was hanging ornaments on a huge tree while a little girl watched. "Mama, when are the guests coming?" the little girl asked. "Soon, Emily," the woman answered. "It's going to be the grandest Christmas ball Thornfield Manor has ever seen." The scene faded, and I was back in my shop, my hands shaking. The ornament felt warm, like it had just been sitting by a fire. I needed help. That's when I remembered William Peters, the local historian who sometimes came to my shop looking for old books. He knew everything about our town's history. The next morning I called him. "William? It's Margaret from the antique shop. I need your help with something unusual." He came right over. William looked exactly like what you'd expect a historian to look like. Gray beard, glasses, and a tweed jacket with patches on the elbows. But his eyes were kind, and he listened without laughing when I told him about the ornaments and my vision. "Margaret," he said slowly, "I think I know what these are." He picked up a different ornament, one showing people dancing. In 1888, Thornfield Manor held a Christmas Eve ball. By midnight, 12 people were dead. No one knows exactly what happened, but there were stories about a man named Theodore Winchester, who practiced dark magic. Just then, the ornament in his hand glowed. The shop disappeared again, and we were both standing in a ballroom. Couples were dancing, their fancy clothes sparkling in the candlelight. But something felt wrong. In the corner, a man in a black coat was drawing strange symbols under a table when no one was looking. "That's Winchester," William whispered, though I don't know how he knew. The vision ended as quickly as it began. William looked pale. "They're not just ornaments," he said. "They're holding memories, and maybe something more." I told him about the 13th ornament, the dark one that had appeared on my doorstep. His face got even paler. "We need to research more," he said. "These ornaments, they're connected to something terrible that happened that night. And I think," he looked at the dark ornament, "I think whatever caused those deaths might be trapped in there." That's when we heard it, a whisper coming from the 13th ornament, like someone trying to get out. The temperature in the shop dropped so fast I could see our breath in the air. William grabbed my hand. "Margaret, we need to be careful. These aren't just old Christmas decorations anymore. They're trying to tell us something, but..." He looked at the dark ornament again. "Some stories are dangerous to hear." I should have been terrified. But with William there, holding my hand, I felt brave instead. We had a mystery to solve, and somehow, I knew we were meant to solve it together. What we didn't know then was that we only had until Christmas Eve to figure it all out. The ornaments were getting stronger, and the thing trapped in the dark one was getting restless. Time was running out. Over the next few days, William and I looked at each ornament. Every one showed us a different piece of that terrible Christmas Eve from long ago. The ornament with carolers showed us 5 people singing outside Thornfield Manor. "God rest ye merry gentlemen," they sang, their breath making clouds in the cold air. But in the window behind them, we saw Winchester drawing more of his strange symbols. He was preparing something, William said. "Look how the symbols are on every window, every door." The ornament with the feast showed us the manor's dining room. 12 places were set with silver and crystal. Winchester was there again, putting something in the wine glasses when the servants weren't looking. Each vision made my heart heavier. These weren't just memories. They were the last moments of 12 innocent people's lives. One evening, while William was going through old newspapers on my computer, I heard a sound from the box of ornaments. It was like crying, but very soft, coming from all 12 ornaments at once. The 13th ornament, though, made a different sound, like angry whispers. "William," I said quietly, "I think the souls of those 12 people are trapped in these ornaments." He nodded slowly. "I found something," he said, turning the computer screen toward me. After the massacre, Winchester wrote in his diary, that he had to trap the souls to contain something worse, something that had possessed one of the party guests. "The 13th ornament," I whispered. "Yes. But Winchester disappeared after that night. The diary just stops." William took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Margaret, I need to tell you something." But before he could finish, all the lights in the shop went out. The 13th ornament started to glow with a dark light, like a black star. The whispers got louder. I grabbed William's hand. "We need to." The ornament cracked, just a tiny crack, but we both felt the cold that leaked out of it. It was a cold that went right through to your bones. "It's getting stronger," William said. "Whatever's in there is trying to get out." His voice shook a little. "Margaret, there's something you should know. I'm Winchester's great-grandson." I stared at him in the dark. "What?" "I've been searching for these ornaments my whole life. Not to use them, to make sure they're safe. What's trapped in that 13th ornament? It's pure evil. And it's strongest at Christmas, just like it was in 1888. The whispers from the dark ornament got louder, angry. The crack grew a little bigger. "How do we stop it?" I asked. "The binding ritual," William said. "The one Winchester used. But," he looked at me with sad eyes, "it needs a sacrifice. Someone has to take Winchester's place, become the new keeper of the ornaments." "That's why you got close to me," I said, feeling hurt. "You knew the ornaments would come here." "No," he squeezed my hand. "Margaret, I've been searching for years. The ornaments chose you. I never expected to care about you so much." The crack in the 13th ornament grew again. We had until Christmas Eve, just 3 days away, before whatever was inside broke free. I looked at the 12 ornaments, hearing their soft, sad cries. Then I looked at William and made my decision. "Teach me the ritual," I said. "All of it." "Margaret, no. Those 12 souls have been trapped for over 100 years. They deserve peace." I touched his cheek. "And someone needs to make sure that thing in the 13th ornament never hurts anyone again." The dark ornament cracked again, and we both knew we were running out of time. Christmas Eve arrived with heavy snow. William and I spent all day preparing the shop for the ritual. We pushed the furniture against the walls and drew Winchester's symbols on the floor with white chalk. The 13 ornaments sat in a circle in the middle. "Are you sure about this?" William asked for the 100th time. "Once it starts, there's no going back." I nodded. Outside, the sun was setting. "Tell me one more time what will happen." "At midnight, you'll stand in the circle. I'll read the words from Winchester's diary, and," he took a shaky breath, "if it works, you'll take his place. The 12 souls will be free, but you'll become the 13th ornament, keeping the evil one locked away forever." The dark ornament was almost completely cracked now. Black mist leaked from it, making the air feel thick and cold. The whispers had turned into angry screams that only we could hear. At 11:55, I hugged William. "Thank you for helping me," I said. "And I forgive you for not telling me everything at first." "Margaret, please." "I'm 82 years old, William. I've lived my life. Those souls deserve to live theirs, even if it's in heaven." I stepped into the circle. The 12 ornaments began to glow with a warm, silvery light. I could see the faces of the people trapped inside, watching me with hope in their eyes. William opened the diary with trembling hands and started to read. The words were in Latin, but somehow I understood them. "On this holy night, a willing soul makes their sacrifice." The 13th ornament exploded. Black smoke poured out, taking the shape of something terrible, all teeth and claws and hatred. It lunged at William, but the circle of symbols held it back. The thing spoke in a voice like breaking glass. "Free. After all these years. Keep reading," I shouted to William. The 12 ornaments floated into the air, spinning around me. I felt their light filling me up, warm and bright. The trapped souls were helping me. William's voice grew stronger. "To bind the darkness, to free the innocent." The dark thing screamed and tried to escape, but the circle kept it in. I wasn't scared anymore. I felt the love of 12 souls who had waited so long for this moment. Let the willing replace the weary. Let the chains be renewed. Everything happened at once. The 12 ornaments burst into sparks of light that flew up and disappeared, souls finally free to go to heaven. The dark thing shrieked as it was pulled toward me. I felt myself changing, becoming something else. The last thing I saw was William's face, tears running down his cheeks as he spoke the final words. Then everything went quiet. William tells me that where I stood, there's now a beautiful silver ornament, number 13 in a new set. He says that inside, if you look carefully, you can see a tiny old woman in her antique shop, keeping watch over her treasures. That's me. The dark thing is still here too, but it's weak now, trapped behind my love and determination. It will stay trapped forever. William hung the new 13th ornament on a special stand in the shop's window. Every Christmas Eve, he puts out 12 new ornaments, simple, normal ones, to remember the souls that were freed. Sometimes late at night I hear him talking to me. He tells me about his day, about the shop he runs at now, about the lives that were saved because of what I chose to do. I don't regret my choice. Every Christmas Eve, when families walk past the shop window, I watch their happy faces through my glass wall. They're safe. The darkness is contained, and I'm still here, doing what I've always done, watching over precious things and keeping them safe. That's the thing about love and sacrifice. Sometimes the biggest gifts we give are the ones no one ever knows about. So if you're ever walking past an antique shop on Christmas Eve and you see an old silver ornament in the window, stop and look closely. You might just see me, smiling back at you, still keeping my final, most important treasure safe. 1 year later. The antique shop looks different now. William kept most things the same, but he added more Christmas decorations. He says it makes me feel less lonely, and he's right. Every morning he comes in early and says, "Good morning" to my ornament. Every evening, he tells me about the interesting things that happened that day. I can't answer back, but I think he knows I'm listening. Last week, a little girl pressed her nose against the shop window, staring at me. "Mommy, look." The lady in the ornament waved at me. Her mother didn't believe her, of course. But the little girl was right, I did wave. Just a tiny wave. But it made her smile so big. William hired a young woman named Sarah to help in the shop. She's learning about antiques, just like I learned many years ago. Sometimes she polishes my ornament and tells me about her dreams. She wants to own a shop of her own someday. The other day, William hung a photo of me next to my ornament. It was taken just a week before everything happened, showing me smiling behind my counter. Under it, there's a small sign that says, "Margaret Blackwood. She saved more than just antiques." The dark thing is still here with me, but it's quiet now. My love for the shop, for William, for all the people who come in looking for treasures, it's too strong for the darkness to fight against. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the snow is falling, I see 12 spots of light dancing outside the shop window. I think it's them, the souls I helped free. They come back to say thank you, and to remind me that I'm not alone. Being an ornament isn't so different from being an antique dealer, really. I'm still watching over precious things, still part of people's Christmas memories. And every time a child's eyes light up looking at the decorations, or a couple picks out their first Christmas ornament together, I feel a little warmer inside my silver glass world. William says I'm his hero, but the truth is, I just did what anyone would do when faced with a choice between helping others and helping yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting the darkness. It's simply choosing to contain it, day after day, with love and patience. So if you're ever feeling alone on Christmas Eve, remember there's a little antique shop with a special ornament in the window. Inside it, an old lady is watching over everyone's happy moments, keeping them safe, just like she always did. And maybe, just maybe, she'll wave at you too. I never thought a box of Christmas ornaments would change my life forever. But that's exactly what happened last December, just when I was starting to think my days of adventure were long behind me. I'm Margaret Blackwood, and I've been running Blackwood Antiques on Pine Street for over 30 years now. Most days I sit in my cozy little shop surrounded by old treasures and memories that other people don't want anymore. Sometimes I talk to the items, silly as that sounds. When you've been alone as long as I have, even teacups and old mirrors start to feel like friends. It was a cold Tuesday morning when the package arrived. No return address, just my name and shop address written in curly handwriting that reminded me of the letters my grandmother used to write. The brown paper wrapping crinkled under my fingers as I carried it to my workbench in the back room. Well, let's see what we have here, I said to myself, carefully unwrapping the package. Inside was an old wooden box, dark with age and smooth from years of handling. When I lifted the lid, I gasped. Nestled in faded red velvet were 12 of the most beautiful Christmas ornaments I'd ever seen. They were made of mercury glass, that old silvery material that catches light like moonlight on water. Each one was perfectly preserved, not a crack or scratch in sight. That alone made me suspicious. Mercury glass is fragile, and finding even one piece in perfect condition is rare. Finding 12? That was impossible. But it wasn't just their condition that caught my eye. Each ornament showed a different scene, like tiny snow globes without the snow. One had a Christmas tree being decorated, another showed a grand dining room with a feast laid out. There were dancers in ball gowns, children opening presents, carolers by a lamppost, each scene more detailed than the last. I picked up the ornament with the Christmas tree scene to examine it more closely. That's when I saw something that made my hands shake. The tiny figure hanging an ornament on the tree moved. Not like a reflection or a trick of the light, it actually turned its head and looked at me. I nearly dropped the ornament but managed to set it down gently. I must be seeing things, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. When I looked again, the figure was frozen in place, just like it should be. But I knew what I'd seen. After 3 decades of handling antiques, you develop a sense for things that are different, special, sometimes dangerous. These ornaments were definitely special, and my gut told me they might be dangerous too. I spent the rest of the morning searching online for any mention of similar ornaments. It took hours, but finally, I found something. A small article about a Christmas Eve massacre at Thornfield Manor in 1888. The article mentioned 12 unique mercury glass ornaments that disappeared after that horrible night. Just as I finished reading, the shop's bell rang. I hurried to the front, expecting a customer, but no one was there. Instead, on the welcome mat, sat a single ornament, number 13. My heart pounding. I picked it up. Unlike the others, this one was completely dark inside, like a piece of night had been trapped in the glass. As I held it, I swear I heard whispers, too quiet to understand, but too clear to ignore. I knew I should have been scared. Maybe I should have packed everything up and shipped it far away. But there's something that happens when you get to my age. You start to realize that the scary things might be your last chance at doing something important, something that matters. So instead of running, I took the 13th ornament to my workbench and placed it with the others. Then I did what I always do when I'm worried. I made a cup of tea and started taking notes. I had no idea then that I was starting the strangest and most important investigation of my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ornament seemed to call to me from my shop downstairs. I live in a small apartment above my store, and every creak of the old building made me wonder if something was happening below. At midnight, I gave up trying to sleep and went down to the shop, still in my robe and slippers. The moonlight coming through the front window made the ornaments shine like stars. I picked up the first ornament again, the one with the Christmas tree. This time, I wasn't imagining things. The tiny figure inside definitely moved. It turned toward me, and suddenly the room around me disappeared. I was standing in a grand living room decorated for Christmas. The air smelled like pine needles and cinnamon. A woman in a long dress was hanging ornaments on a huge tree while a little girl watched. "Mama, when are the guests coming?" the little girl asked. "Soon, Emily," the woman answered. "It's going to be the grandest Christmas ball Thornfield Manor has ever seen." The scene faded, and I was back in my shop, my hands shaking. The ornament felt warm, like it had just been sitting by a fire. I needed help. That's when I remembered William Peters, the local historian who sometimes came to my shop looking for old books. He knew everything about our town's history. The next morning I called him. "William? It's Margaret from the antique shop. I need your help with something unusual." He came right over. William looked exactly like what you'd expect a historian to look like. Gray beard, glasses, and a tweed jacket with patches on the elbows. But his eyes were kind, and he listened without laughing when I told him about the ornaments and my vision. "Margaret," he said slowly, "I think I know what these are." He picked up a different ornament, one showing people dancing. In 1888, Thornfield Manor held a Christmas Eve ball. By midnight, 12 people were dead. No one knows exactly what happened, but there were stories about a man named Theodore Winchester who practiced dark magic. Just then, the ornament in his hand glowed. The shop disappeared again, and we were both standing in a ballroom. Couples were dancing, their fancy clothes sparkling in the candlelight. But something felt wrong. In the corner, a man in a black coat was drawing strange symbols under a table when no one was looking. "That's Winchester," William whispered, though I don't know how he knew. The vision ended as quickly as it began. William looked pale. "They're not just ornaments," he said. "They're holding memories, and maybe something more." I told him about the 13th ornament, the dark one that had appeared on my doorstep. His face got even paler. "We need to research more," he said. "These ornaments, they're connected to something terrible that happened that night. And I think," he looked at the dark ornament, "I think whatever caused those deaths might be trapped in there." That's when we heard it, a whisper coming from the 13th ornament, like someone trying to get out. The temperature in the shop dropped so fast I could see our breath in the air. William grabbed my hand. "Margaret, we need to be careful. These aren't just old Christmas decorations anymore. They're trying to tell us something, but..." He looked at the dark ornament again. "Some stories are dangerous to hear." I should have been terrified. But with William there, holding my hand, I felt brave instead. We had a mystery to solve, and somehow, I knew we were meant to solve it together. What we didn't know then was that we only had until Christmas Eve to figure it all out. The ornaments were getting stronger, and the thing trapped in the dark one was getting restless. Time was running out. Over the next few days, William and I looked at each ornament. Every one showed us a different piece of that terrible Christmas Eve from long ago. The ornament with carolers showed us 5 people singing outside Thornfield Manor. "God rest ye merry gentlemen," they sang, their breath making clouds in the cold air. But in the window behind them, we saw Winchester drawing more of his strange symbols. He was preparing something, William said. "Look how the symbols are on every window, every door." The ornament with the feast showed us the manor's dining room. 12 places were set with silver and crystal. Winchester was there again, putting something in the wine glasses when the servants weren't looking. Each vision made my heart heavier. These weren't just memories. They were the last moments of 12 innocent people's lives. One evening, while William was going through old newspapers on my computer, I heard a sound from the box of ornaments. It was like crying, but very soft, coming from all 12 ornaments at once. The 13th ornament, though, made a different sound, like angry whispers. "William," I said quietly, "I think the souls of those 12 people are trapped in these ornaments." He nodded slowly. "I found something," he said, turning the computer screen toward me. After the massacre, Winchester wrote in his diary that he had to trap the souls to contain something worse, something that had possessed one of the party guests. "The 13th ornament," I whispered. "Yes, but Winchester disappeared after that night. The diary just stops. William took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Margaret, I need to tell you something." But before he could finish, all the lights in the shop went out. The 13th ornament started to glow with a dark light, like a black star. The whispers got louder. I grabbed William's hand. "We need to." The ornament cracked, just a tiny crack, but we both felt the cold that leaked out of it. It was a cold that went right through to your bones. "It's getting stronger," William said. "Whatever's in there is trying to get out." His voice shook a little. "Margaret, there's something you should know. I'm Winchester's great-grandson." "Don't stop singing," I told my students, trying to hide my fear. I grabbed the nearest bell, the one with the snowflake pattern, and rang it in time with their song. The snow figures turned toward us. They had faces made of ice crystals, and their eyes glowed like winter stars. But as we kept singing, they began to sway with the music. One by one, I reached for the other bells. Each one felt like touching frozen metal, but I didn't let go. Our voices grew stronger, and the bells chimed together in harmony. The ice creatures started to shrink, their sharp edges softening. They swirled around us one last time, then disappeared into the bells with a sound like sighing wind. But as we walked down the tower steps, tired but relieved, I heard a deep cracking sound from below the church. "What was that?" Tommy asked. I looked at the remaining bells we still needed to find. "I think," I said slowly, "there's something else down there, something that's been waiting a very long time." The floor trembled beneath our feet, and a cold blue light shone through the cracks in the stone. The blue light grew brighter between the church's floor stones. Tommy pointed to a wooden door we'd never noticed before, hidden under an old carpet. "There's another bell down there," I said, reading quickly from Grandmother's diary. "The master bell, the one that controls all the others." My hands trembled as I pulled the door open. Stone steps led down into darkness, lit only by that strange blue glow. My students huddled close behind me as we descended. "Stay together," I whispered. "And keep humming, Carol of the Bells. Don't stop, no matter what." The basement was huge, with walls of ancient stone. Icicles hung from the ceiling like crystal chandeliers. And there, in the center of the room, floating above a stone pedestal, was the biggest bell I'd ever seen. It was covered in glowing symbols, and frost spirits danced around it like tiny stars. "So," said a voice like crackling ice, "you found our home." The spirits took shape, 12 figures made of snow and frost. They looked almost human, but their eyes glowed with winter's cold light. The one who spoke wore a crown of icicles. "Your grandmother kept us bound for so long," the Spirit King said. "But now we'll make the whole world our kingdom. Endless winter, endless night." The temperature dropped so low it hurt to breathe. Ice crept up the walls toward us. But then I remembered something from Grandmother's diary. These spirits weren't evil. They were part of nature. Just like summer sunshine or spring rain, they just needed balance. "Everyone," I said to my students, "sing, sing with all your heart." We began Carol of the Bells, our voices shaking at first but growing stronger. I took out the bells we'd recovered and rang them in the pattern Grandmother had written down. The Spirit King tilted his head, listening. Other spirits began to sway. "This song," one whispered. "We remember." "It's not about trapping you," I said, still ringing the bells. "It's about harmony. Winter's beautiful, but it needs to dance with spring." That's why my grandmother rang the bells every year. Not to cage you, but to remind you of the dance. More spirits joined in our song. Frost patterns on the walls turned into beautiful shapes, flowers, trees, stars. The big bell began to ring on its own, its deep voice harmonizing with ours. The Spirit King smiled. Not a cold smile now, but one that reminded me of sunshine on snow. "Perhaps," he said, "we can learn this dance again." One by one, the spirits returned to their bells, not forced, but choosing to join the harmony. The huge bell lowered itself into my hands, surprisingly warm now. As we walked back up to the church, carrying all 12 bells. The storm outside gentled into soft, perfect snowflakes. "Miss Hamilton?" Sarah asked. "Will they come back next Christmas?" I looked at the bells, remembering the Spirit King's smile. "Yes," I said. "But next time, they'll come as friends to help us celebrate winter's magic. And we'll be ready with a song." That Christmas Eve, our concert filled the old church with music. If you looked carefully, you might have seen frost spirits dancing in the candlelight, and heard in our bells the joyful voice of winter itself, no longer lonely, no longer fierce, but part of the endless circle of seasons. And every year after that, people said our town had the most beautiful winter nights, where the snow fell like music, and the bells rang with stories of ice and wonder. My name is Michael Blackwood, and I'm a real estate agent. Well, I was, until that night at Patterson House changed everything. It started like any other day at work, December 23rd, and I was holding an open house at the old Patterson place, you know, that big Victorian mansion at the end of Christmas Lane. Kind of funny how the street got that name, considering what happened there. The house had been on the market for months, and no one wanted to touch it. Can't blame them. Not after that family disappeared there 25 years ago. "It's just an old house," I kept telling myself as I unlocked the front door that morning. The place was dusty but beautiful, with its tall windows and wooden stairs that creaked under my... I set up my signs and information packets, hoping someone would finally want to buy this place. Hours passed, and not a single person showed up. The sky started getting dark early, and then the snow began. Not just regular snow, we're talking about the kind that blankets everything in white within minutes. I called my boss, telling her I needed to close up early. "Be careful driving home, Michael," she said. But when I tried to start my car, nothing happened. Dead battery. Perfect. The wind howled louder, and the snow was getting worse. I had no choice but to go back inside. At least the heat was working, and I had my phone. I just called a tow truck and waited out. That's when things got weird. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when it died too. Not low battery, just dead. And then the lights started flickering. I heard something upstairs, like footsteps, but soft ones, like someone tiptoeing around. "Hello?" I called out. "Is someone?" No answer, but the footsteps continued. I grabbed my flashlight and walked up the stairs, telling myself it was probably just the wind making the old house creak. But deep down, I knew it was. The upstairs hallway was different somehow. Was it my imagination? Or were there Christmas decorations that hadn't been there before? A wreath on one door, tinsel along the banister, and the smell, that unmistakable smell of pine needles and cinnamon, like someone was baking Christmas cookies. My watch said 11:59 p.m. 1 minute to midnight. 1 minute until Christmas Eve. And that's when I heard the children laugh. I turned around and there it was. A room at the end of the hall, glowing with warm light that shouldn't have been. Through the crack in the door, I could see a Christmas tree, presents, and shadows moving across the wall. I should have run. I should have broken a window and jumped into the snow. But instead, I did what any curious fool would do. I walked toward that door, reached for the handle, and opened it. That's when everything changed. That's when I learned what it means to be truly trapped, not by locks or walls, but by time itself. The clock struck midnight, and Christmas Eve began. Again, and again, and again. I woke up in a dusty armchair, my neck stiff from sleeping in an awkward position. For a moment, I thought it had all been a weird dream. But then I saw the Christmas tree. It wasn't just any Christmas tree. It was decorated with old-fashioned ornaments, the kind my grandma used to have. Tinsel sparkled in the morning light, and underneath were presents wrapped in paper I hadn't seen since I was a kid. But I knew for sure there hadn't been a tree here yesterday. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. "Is anyone here?" The house answered with Christmas music playing softly from somewhere upstairs. Not from speakers or a radio. It sounded like someone was playing a piano. My phone still didn't work, and when I looked out the window, I couldn't believe my eyes. The snow from last night was gone, replaced by fresh snow falling from the sky. But that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was that I couldn't see anything beyond the front yard. Just white, like someone had erased the rest of the world. I tried the front door. It opened, but when I stepped outside, the cold hit me so hard it felt like needles on my skin. After 10 steps, the snow got so thick I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Something in my gut told me if I went any further, I'd be lost forever. Back inside, the piano music got louder. I followed it upstairs, and each room I passed showed a different Christmas scene, like I was walking through someone's memory. In one room, a family was having Christmas dinner. I could see their shapes through a kind of fog, hear their laughter, smell their turkey dinner. But when I tried to step inside, they faded away like smoke. The next room showed kids opening presents, but everything moved in slow motion. Their excited faces frozen in half smiles, wrapping paper hanging in the air. It was beautiful and scary at the same time. Then I found a door I hadn't noticed before. Behind it was a small study with a desk and an old newspaper. The date made my heart stop. December 24th, 1998. The headline read, "Local family vanishes on Christmas Eve. No clues found at Patterson House." As I read the article, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath in the air, and the Christmas music stopped. In the silence, I heard a child whisper, "Are you here to help us?" I spun around, but no one was there. Just a Christmas card on the desk that definitely hadn't been there a second ago. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside, in crayon, someone had written, "The house keeps us here. It feeds on our Christmas memories. Every 25 years, it gets hungry again. You have until midnight." The piano music started again, but this time it was playing Silent Night. So slowly it barely sounded like music anymore. And that's when I realized I wasn't just trapped in the house, I was trapped in time. Looking at my watch didn't help anymore. Every time I checked, it showed 11:59 p.m., always 1 minute before Christmas Eve. Always 1 minute before. Whatever was going to happen, I had to find a way out. But first, I needed to understand what this house was doing, and why it chose me. Because in the reflection of the study window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Behind my shoulder, just for a second, was the smiling face of a little girl. And she was wearing clothes from 1998. I followed the little girl's reflection down the hallway, but she always stayed just out of reach. Every time I thought I'd caught up, she'd disappear around another corner, her giggles echoing off the wall. "Wait," I called out. "I want to help." She finally stopped at the end of the hall, near an old grandfather clock. Now I could see her clearly. She wore a red Christmas dress with white lace, and her hair was tied with ribbon. Her name was Sarah Patterson. I somehow knew that now. She'd lived in this house 25 years ago. "The others are waiting," she said, pointing to the clock. "But be quiet. The house is listening." As if on cue, the floorboards creaked behind us. Sarah vanished, leaving me alone with the ticking clock. Except the clock wasn't really ticking, it was counting backward. I pressed my ear against the clock's wooden case and heard voices coming from inside. Not from the clock itself, but from somewhere. Behind it, I pushed, and the whole clock swung forward like a door, revealing a hidden room. The room was full of Christmas decorations from different times. Old ones made of glass and metal, newer plastic ones, and even some that looked handmade by kids. But what caught my eye were the photos on the walls, dozens of them, showing different families celebrating Christmas in this house. In every photo, the people were smiling, but their eyes looked scared. "We're all still here," a voice said behind me. I turned to see a man in clothes from the 1970s. "I'm Tom. I was the first one at." One by one, they appeared. People from different times, all trapped by the house. A woman in a 1980s sweater, a teenager from the 1990s, Sarah and her parents from 1998, all of them caught in the house's endless Christmas Eve. "Why?" I asked. "Why does it do this?" "The house feeds on joy," Tom explained. "Real joy, the kind you feel at Christmas. But it got greedy, started taking whole families, keeping their happiness for." Sarah tugged at my sleeve. "Show him the tree, Tom. Show him why we can't leave." In the corner stood a small Christmas tree, but this one was different. Instead of ornaments, it had glowing orbs hanging from its branches. Inside each orb was what looked like a swirling cloud. Our memories, the woman in the 80s sweater said. The happy ones. The house takes them, uses them to stay alive. Every 25 years, it needs more. That's why you're here, Sarah said. The house is hungry again. Suddenly, the room got colder. The lights flickered, and the ornaments on the tree glowed bright. It's feeding time, Tom whispered. The house knows we're all together. We have to split up. Everyone disappeared except Sarah, who grabbed my hand. Her fingers felt like I. Find the first Christmas, she said quickly. Before the house was bad. That's the only way. She vanished before finishing her sentence. The hidden room began to fade away, the walls turning misty like a fog was rolling in. Through the fog, I saw more Christmas scenes playing out, but they were different now, darker, sadder. The house was showing me what happened to all those families. I checked my watch again. Still 11:59 p.m. But now I knew what I had to do. I had to find the house's first Christmas, back when it was just a home and not a trap. The answer had to be there. I just hoped I could find it before the house got hungry enough to add my memories to its collection. Because the fog was getting thicker, and somewhere in the house, that piano started playing Silent Night again. Only this time it sounded more like a warning than a carol. The fog led me to the attic. Unlike the rest of the house, there weren't any Christmas decorations here, just old boxes, dusty furniture, and a single window looking out into the endless snow. In the corner, I found a trunk with Christmas, 1923, written on it in faded letters. Inside were old newspapers, photos, and a diary. As I picked up the diary, a photo fell out. It showed a man standing in front of the house when it was newly built. He wasn't smiling. The diary belonged to Emily Green, the first person to live in the house. As I read, my hands started shaking. December 24, 1923, I read aloud. Today, I did something terrible. The house was supposed to be perfect, my gift to the town's children who had nowhere to celebrate Christmas. But nothing was going right. The decorations were wrong, the food was burning. The children were crying instead of laughing. I turned the page, and the temperature dropped so low I could see my breath. I got so angry, the diary continued. I told them all to leave. I screamed at them to get out. On Christmas Eve, I turned away children who had no homes, no families. I slammed the door on their tears. The piano music started again, but now it sounded like crying. That night, something changed in the house. It felt their sadness, their disappointment, and it got hungry for the happiness it had lost. Now it won't let anyone leave until it gets what it wants, a perfect Christmas. But no Christmas is ever perfect enough. Sarah appeared beside me, her face sad. The house remembers those first children, she said. It's still trying to give them their perfect Christmas, but it doesn't understand that by taking people's joy, it's doing the same thing Emily did. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut. The house groaned like it was waking up. It's almost time, Tom's voice came from nowhere. Midnight is coming, for real this time. The diary's last page had words appearing on it as I watched, writing themselves, "Only a perfect Christmas can break the curse. But perfection isn't what you think." The house shook. Ornaments started falling from nowhere, shattering on the floor. The fog got thicker, and I could hear children crying, not just from the past, but from every Christmas the house had stolen. "I know what we have to do," I said, finally understanding. "We have to give those first children their Christmas back. Not a perfect one, a real one." Sarah grabbed my hand again. "But how? We're running out of time." I looked at my watch. For the first time, it had changed. 11:60 p.m. The house was breaking its own rules. Time was running out, and we had to gather everyone, not just the trapped souls, but the memories of those first children too. The floorboards cracked under our feet as the house fought against us. It didn't want to remember that first Christmas. It wanted to keep trying for perfection forever. But as Sarah and I raced down the stairs, I knew we had a chance. Because Christmas isn't about being perfect. It's about being together, even when things go wrong. And somewhere in this house, those first children from 1923 were still waiting for someone to open the door and let them in. We just had to find them before the house's hunger destroyed us all. The house was falling apart around us. Christmas lights exploded like fireworks, and ornaments crashed to the floor. Sarah and I ran from room to room, gathering everyone we could find. "Tom," I shouted, "get the memory tree from the hidden room." The trapped souls appeared one by one. Tom with the small tree of glowing memories. The woman in the 80s sweater carrying old Christmas cards. Sarah's parents holding hands. Everyone was here except the children from 1923. "Where would you go?" I asked Sarah. "If you were a scared child on Christmas Eve, where would you hide?" Her eyes lit up. "The kitchen. That's where the cookies were supposed to be." We all ran downstairs. The house shook harder, trying to stop us. Furniture slid across the floor by itself. Doors slammed, but we kept going. The kitchen was ice cold. In the corner, huddled together, we saw them, the ghost-like shapes of children from 1923. They looked so small, so sad. "It's okay," I said softly, kneeling down. "You can come out now." The children looked at me with afraid eyes. One of them spoke in a whisper. "But Christmas is ruined. Nothing's perfect." That's when I knew what to do. I took an ornament from Tom's memory tree and held it out. Inside, my own Christmas memory swirled, me as a kid, dropping the star for our tree, crying because I'd broken it. But then my mom hugging me, telling me it didn't matter, that being together was what made Christmas special. "Look," I said, "Christmas doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real." Sarah stepped forward, holding out her hand. "Come celebrate with us, just as we are." One by one, the children stood up. The house creaked and moaned, but it wasn't angry anymore. It was letting go. Tom placed the memory tree in the middle of the kitchen. Everyone, the trapped souls, the children from 1923, even Emily's ghost who appeared in the doorway, joined hands in a circle around it. The ornaments on the tree started glowing brighter. Each one showed a different Christmas memory, some happy, some sad, all real. The memories swirled together like snow in the wind. And then we heard it. Not the scary piano music from before, but children laughing, real laughter. The house sighed, and warmth flooded back into the rooms. The fog lifted. Through the windows we could see the real world again. "Thank you." The children from 1923 said, their shapes growing brighter. "This is the Christmas we always wanted, just to be included." One by one, they faded away, but this time into light, not darkness. The trapped souls followed, each one smiling as they disappeared. Sarah hugged me before she went. "Don't forget us," she said. "And don't forget what Christmas really means." When the sun rose on December 24th, I was alone in the house again. But it felt different, peaceful. On the kitchen table sat a single Christmas cookie and a note written in crayon. "Some doors are meant to stay open. Merry Christmas." I still sell houses on Christmas Lane, but the Patterson house isn't for sale anymore. It's a children's shelter now, where the doors are always open on Christmas Eve. And sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can hear children laughing from this Christmas and all the Christmases that came before. Because perfect or not, everyone deserves a place to call home for Christmas. Here I am, Dr. Olivia Winters, sitting in my warm office back home, trying to write down what happened at that Arctic research station. My hands still shake when I think about it. The memories feel like a bad dream, but the scars on my left hand remind me it was all too real. I should start at the beginning. 3 months ago, I was just another climate scientist, excited about leading my first major research project. My team and I were heading to an old weather station near the North Pole to study ice core samples. We wanted to understand how the climate had changed over the last 100 years. The station was this big, gray building, sitting all alone in the endless white of the Arctic. Kind of ugly, if I'm being honest. But it had everything we needed: labs, living quarters, and a garage for our snow vehicles. The Russians had built it back in the 1980s and left it behind when the Soviet Union fell apart. Now, it was ours to use. My team was small but good at what they did. There was Mark, our tech expert, who could fix anything with duct tape and paper clips. Sarah was our ice core specialist. She could read the layers of ice like I read a book. And then there was Dev, our weather expert, who always seemed to know when a storm was coming, even before our fancy equipment did. We were supposed to be there for 6 months, just gathering data, drilling ice cores, and trying not to go crazy from the endless polar night. Pretty normal stuff for Arctic researchers. But then we found that metal door hidden under the snow, and everything changed. Chapter 1. The Storm. "Storm's coming," Dev said at breakfast, looking up from his coffee. A big one. I glanced at the window. The sky was still clear, but I'd learned to trust Dev's weather sense. "How long do we have?" 6 hours, maybe less. "We should bring in the equipment from the drilling site." I nodded, pushing away my half-eaten toast. "Mark, can you and Sarah secure the ice core samples? I'll help Dev with the drilling gear." Outside, the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. The sun hadn't risen in weeks. That's winter in the Arctic for you. We worked under the bright emergency lights we'd set up around the station, our breath making little clouds in the freezing air. While Dev and I were pulling up the drilling equipment, my boot hit something that made a weird metallic sound. Not the normal crunch of ice and snow. "Hey, Dev, bring that light over here." He walked over, pointing the powerful beam where I was brushing away snow with my gloved hand. There was something down there, something made of metal. "Is that a door?" Dev asked, kneeling beside me. It was, a big round door, like something you'd see on a submarine, half buried in the ice. There was writing on it, but it was in Russian. "We need to get inside," I said, feeling weirdly excited. "The storm can wait a few minutes." Dev looked unsure. "Doc, that storm's not going to wait for anyone." But I could tell he was curious too. We spent the next 20 minutes clearing snow and ice from around the door. The whole time I kept thinking about how this wasn't on any of the station's blueprints we'd studied. The handle was frozen solid, but between Dev and me, we managed to turn it. It opened with a sound like a giant sighing. Cold, stale air rushed up from the dark opening below. Our light showed a metal staircase leading down into blackness. That's when we heard the first rumble of thunder from the approaching storm. We should have closed that door right then. Should have waited for better weather, gotten proper approval, called it in to the research board. That's what a sensible scientist would have done. But I've learned that even sensible scientists can make bad decisions when they're curious enough. And I was very, very curious about what was hiding under all that ice and snow. I just wish I'd known then what that curiosity would cost us. "We should get the others," Dev said, shining his light down the dark stairway. I nodded, but couldn't take my eyes off those stairs. "You're right, and we need better lights." We hurried back to the station just as the wind was picking up. Snow was starting to blow sideways, and the temperature was dropping fast. Inside, Mark and Sarah were warming up with hot coffee. "You won't believe what we found," I said, still catching my breath. "There's a hidden door out there. It leads underground." Sarah's eyes went wide. "Under the station? That's not in any of the blueprints." "Exactly." I grabbed our emergency lights and some rope. "Who's coming with me to check it out?" They all looked at each other. The storm was howling outside now, rattling the windows. "We really shouldn't go down there without telling someone," Mark said, but he was already putting his coat back on. 20 minutes later, all 4 of us were standing around that metal door. The storm made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead, but we managed to tie a rope between us so we wouldn't get separated. "Stay close," I said, turning on my light, "and if anyone feels uncomfortable, we turn back. Deal?" They nodded. One by one, we climbed down the metal stairs. The sound of our boots echoed off the walls. It felt like walking into a cave, except everything was made of metal and concrete. At the bottom, we found a long hallway. The air smelled old and dusty, like a basement that hadn't been opened in years. Our lights showed old papers scattered on the floor and metal doors along both walls. "Look at this," Sarah said, picking up one of the papers. "It's in Russian, but there's a date, December 1983. Mark was examining the walls. These power cables, they're still intact. This place might have electricity. Should we try turning it on?" Dev asked. I hesitated. The smart thing would be to wait, to document everything properly first. But something about this place made me want to know more right now. "Okay," I said. "But Mark, be careful." Mark followed the cables to an old electrical panel. He opened it slowly, shining his light inside. "Well, would you look at that? The batteries are still here. Soviet engineering, I guess. Let me just—" There was a click, then a hum. Suddenly, old fluorescent lights flickered to life overhead, making us all jump. The hallway stretched further than our lights had shown, with more doors than I could count. "This isn't just a bunker," Dev whispered. "It's a whole underground facility." That's when we heard it, a faint beeping sound coming from somewhere deeper in the facility. It was steady, like a heartbeat. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Olivia, look at this." She was holding another paper she'd found, this one with a symbol on it, a snowflake inside a star. Under it were the words Project Kringle in English and Russian. "Project Kringle?" Mark said. "Like? Kris Kringle? Santa Claus?" I was about to answer when the beeping got louder. Then we heard something else, a sound like old machinery coming to life, groaning and creaking in the depths below us. The lights flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, I swear I heard children laughing. "Maybe we should go back up," Dev said quietly. But it was too late. The storm above had gotten worse. We could hear it even down here, howling like a living thing. We were trapped, at least until the weather cleared. And something in this place was waking up. I reached for the nearest door handle. If we were stuck down here, we might as well find out what the Soviets had been working on. The handle turned with a rusty squeal. "Everyone stay together," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "And keep your eyes open." As we stepped through that door, none of us realized we were walking into a nightmare, one that would change everything we believed about science, faith, and the power of Christmas itself. The first room was some kind of office. Old desks were scattered with papers and what looked like children's drawings. But these weren't happy pictures. They showed dark shapes and worried faces. What were they doing down here? Sarah picked up one of the drawings. Why would there be kids' artwork in a secret Soviet facility? I walked to a large filing cabinet and pulled open a drawer. Inside were folders, surprisingly well preserved in the dry, cold air. Most were in Russian, but some had English translations. "Listen to this," I said, reading from one file. Project Kringle, Phase 1. Measuring belief patterns in test subjects during holiday periods. Mark was checking out an old computer. "Hey, this thing might still work. The Soviets built everything to last." While he fiddled with the computer, Dev and I explored the room. There were more drawings pinned to the walls, each one darker than the last. They showed something that looked like Santa Claus, but wrong somehow, too tall, too thin, with too many shadows around it. Suddenly, the computer buzzed to life. The screen glowed green with white text. "December 20th, 2024, a robotic voice announced from the speakers. 5 days until activation. We all jumped. The voice echoed through the room, bouncing off the metal walls. That's today's date," Dev said quietly. "How did it know?" Before anyone could answer, we heard more machines starting up deeper in the facility. The beeping got louder, and now there was a humming sound too, like a giant engine warming up. "Maybe we should unplug it," Sarah suggested. Mark reached for the power cable, but stopped. "That's weird." It's not plugged in. Look." He held up the cord. It wasn't connected to anything. My hands felt cold and sweaty at the same time. "We need to find out what's happening. Mark, can you get any more information from that computer?" He typed a few commands. "It's running some kind of countdown program. Whatever it's counting down to happens on Christmas Day." That's when we heard the singing. It was faint, like it was coming from far away, but it was definitely there, children singing Jingle Bells. The weird thing was, it seemed to be coming from below us. "There's another level down there," I said, pointing to a stairwell we hadn't noticed before. "We should check it out." "Should we, though?" Sarah looked scared. "This is getting creepy." She was right. It was creepy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we needed to know what was happening. Something was starting up in this facility. Something that had been waiting for 40 years. And it had something to do with Christmas. "We stick together," I said firmly. "First sign of real trouble, we leave. But right now, we're the only ones who know about this place. If something dangerous is about to happen, we need to find out what it is." The singing got louder as we approached the stairs. Our flashlight beams showed more metal steps leading down into darkness. The air felt colder here, and there was a strange smell, like pine needles and something else. Something that made my nose tingle. "Look," Dev pointed at the wall. There was another symbol there, the same snowflake and star we'd seen before, but bigger. Under it were words in Russian and English. "Project Kringle. Belief Enhancement Chamber." "What's a belief enhancement chamber?" Mark asked. The singing stopped suddenly, leaving the facility eerily quiet. Then we heard something else, the sound of bells jingling, coming from somewhere below. And footsteps, heavy footsteps, moving slowly up the stairs toward us. Sarah grabbed my hand. "Olivia, we should go, now." But I couldn't move. None of us could. We stood there, frozen, watching the darkness at the bottom of the stairs. The footsteps got closer and closer. Then all the lights went out. In the pitch black, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A deep, jolly laugh that sounded nothing like the Santa Claus I remembered from my childhood. This laugh had teeth in it. "Run!" I shouted, but my voice sounded tiny in the darkness. We scrambled back up the stairs, tripping and bumping into each other. Behind us, those heavy footsteps kept coming, slow and steady. The jingling of bells got closer. Mark's flashlight beam jumped around as we ran, throwing scary shadows on the walls. We made it back to the first room, slamming the door behind us. "The computer," Sarah gasped, pointing. "It's still on." The green screen was showing new text now. Words appeared like someone was typing them. "Welcome back. We've been waiting for new believers." "What does it mean, waiting?" Dev's voice shook. "There shouldn't be anyone down here." That's when the children's drawings on the walls started to make sense. I grabbed one and held it under the computer's green light. "Look at the dates on these. They're from different years, 1983, 1984, 1985. The Soviets were studying kids here." "Studying what about them?" Mark asked. Before I could answer, the computer screen changed again. Project Kringle status. 96% belief saturation. Sarah was reading an open folder on the desk. "Oh no," she whispered. "They were trying to make something impossible." She looked up at us, her face pale in the green light. "They were trying to make Santa Claus real." "That's crazy," Dev said. "You can't make something real just by believing in it." But even as he said it, we could hear those footsteps again, coming closer. The bells jingled softly. The smell of pine needles got stronger. I grabbed another folder and started reading fast. Project goal: harness collective belief energy during peak Christmas season. Create physical manifestation through focused childhood faith. "The countdown," Mark said suddenly. 5 days until Christmas. They built something down here that feeds on belief in Santa Claus, and it's waking up." The temperature in the room dropped so fast we could see our breath. Frost started spreading across the computer screen. That's when we all felt it, a strange tickle in our minds, like someone was gently pulling at our memories. I started remembering things I hadn't thought about in years. Waiting up on Christmas Eve, listening for sleigh bells, the excitement of believing in magic. "It's feeding," Sarah said softly. "It's feeding on our memories of believing in Santa." The door handle started to turn slowly. Bells jingled just outside. "Hide!" I whispered. We ducked behind desks and filing cabinets. I could hear my heart pounding as the door creaked open. Something tall stepped into the room. In the green light from the computer, I could see it was wearing a red coat. But the coat was old and dark, like it was soaked in shadows. Its boots made heavy sounds on the floor. Clunk, clunk, clunk. I held my breath. We all did. The thing moved to the computer and bent down. Its face. I'll never forget its face. It looked almost human, but stretched too long, like a shadow at sunset. When it smiled, showing too many teeth, frost spread from its feet across the floor. It typed something on the computer. New words appeared. Belief levels rising worldwide. Christmas Eve approaching. Soon all will believe again. Then it spoke, in a voice that sounded like sleigh bells wrapped in darkness. "I can smell your belief, little ones. Your memories make me stronger. Won't you come help spread Christmas cheer?" I closed my eyes tight, trying not to think about Christmas, trying not to remember believing. But it's hard to stop memories when they're being pulled out of you like threads from an old sweater. The thing chuckled, that same deep, wrong laugh we'd heard before. "You can't hide from Christmas spirit," it said, "and soon no one will want to." That's when I noticed something terrible. My childhood memories of Christmas weren't just being pulled out of my mind. They were disappearing completely. And somehow, I knew that whatever this thing was, it was getting ready to leave this facility and share its dark version of Christmas spirit with the whole world. The thing in the red coat moved between the desks, getting closer to where we were hiding. Each step made the floor freeze under its feet. I could feel my childhood memories slipping away like water through my fingers. "I remember you, Olivia Winters," it said in that terrible bell voice. "Age 7, you left out chocolate chip cookies and carrots for the reindeer. Such pure belief." My heart nearly stopped. How did it know that? "You too, Mark Chen, 9 years old. You stayed up all night watching the sky." Mark was shaking next to me. I could see his breath in the cold air. The computer started beeping again. The thing turned to look at the screen, and I saw something that gave me hope. A small red folder had fallen from its coat. While it was distracted, I reached out and grabbed it. Inside was a single page marked "Emergency Shutdown." "Ah," the thing said, still facing the computer. "Found the fail-safe, have you? But are you willing to pay the price?" I read the page quickly. My hands trembled as I understood what it meant. The Soviets had built a way to stop their creation, but it needed something specific, the complete sacrifice of all childhood Christmas memories from willing subjects. Not just forgotten, but given up forever. "Your memories make me stronger," the thing said. "But freely given memories? Those would make me unstoppable." Sarah caught my eye from behind another desk. She pointed to her head, then to her heart, then gave me a tiny nod. She was willing to give up her memories. Dev and Mark nodded too. But could we really do it? Give up every Christmas morning, every moment of magic, every feeling of wonder? The thing turned around slowly. "Time to choose, children. Share your belief with the world, or lose it forever." The computer screen flashed. 4 days until worldwide activation. If it gets out," I whispered to the others, "it'll take everyone's memories, whether they want to give them or not." The thing smiled its terrible smile. "They won't mind. Everyone will believe again. Christmas spirit will rule all hearts, forever." That's when I noticed something else. On the desk near Sarah was an old tape recorder. She saw me looking at it and understood. While I kept the thing talking, she slowly reached for it. "What happens to the people who don't want to believe?" I asked, standing up. I needed to keep its attention. The thing's smile got wider. Frost crackled across the ceiling. There will be no choice, only belief, only Christmas, forever and ever and ever. Now, I shouted. Sarah hit play on the tape recorder. A child's voice filled the room, reciting, "The Night Before Christmas." The thing turned toward the sound, distracted by the pure belief captured on the old tape. "Quick," I said to the others. "The fail-safe room. It has to be behind that door with the snowflake symbol." We ran. Behind us, I heard the thing roar, a sound like winter storms and breaking trees. The tape recording stopped. "You cannot stop belief," it bellowed. We reached the door with the symbol. Through it was a small room with a single chair with wires and a metal helmet. "One of us has to do it," Mark said. "All of us," I corrected. "The paper says it needs all our memories combined." The thing was coming. We could hear bells jingling, getting closer and closer. We had seconds to decide. Keep our precious childhood memories of Christmas magic, or save the world from a twisted version of that same magic. I sat in the chair and grabbed the helmet. "Together," I said, holding out my hands. My friends linked hands with me just as the entity reached the door. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop believing in something you love. I put on the helmet, and everything went white. The pain wasn't sharp, it felt more like fog being pulled out of my head. Every Christmas memory I had started to fade. The stockings, the trees, the presents, the magic. I heard my friends gasp as their memories started disappearing too. The machine hummed louder and louder. The thing in the red coat screamed. Not a human scream. It sounded like ice cracking and winter winds howling. The cold in the room got worse. "You cannot take belief," it shrieked. "You cannot destroy Christmas." But that's not what we were doing. We weren't destroying Christmas. We were just giving up our memories of believing in its magic. There's a big difference. The entity stumbled. Its red coat seemed less dark now, more like old cloth and shadows. Its too long face started to blur around the edges. "No, the belief I need." It reached for us with hands that were becoming see-through. The computer screen flashed one last message. "Belief link broken. Entity containment active." Then everything went quiet. The thing in the red coat faded away like a bad dream, leaving only a faint smell of pine needles. We sat there for a long time holding hands, our minds feeling strangely empty. The facility's lights flickered back to normal. "Did it work?" Sarah asked finally. "Is it gone?" "I think so," I said. "How do you feel?" "Weird," Dev answered. "Like. I know Christmas exists, but all the magic is gone. I remember the facts, but not the feelings." Mark nodded. "I know I used to believe in Santa Claus, but I can't remember what that belief felt like anymore." Epilogue. That was 3 months ago. We sealed up the facility and made up a story about the storm damaging our equipment. Nobody would believe the truth anyway. The weird thing is, we can still enjoy Christmas. We can even celebrate it. We just don't remember what it felt like to believe in the magic of it when we were kids. That's the price we paid, not the holiday itself, just our memories of believing in its wonder. Sometimes I see children getting excited about Santa Claus, their eyes bright with belief, and I feel a little sad. I know I once felt that way too, but I can't remember how it felt. But then I think about what would have happened if that thing had escaped. It would have forced its dark version of belief on everyone, turning Christmas magic into Christmas fear. The old papers we found later told us more about Project Kringle. The Soviets had tried to turn belief into a weapon, not understanding the price of playing with that kind of power. They created something that fed on Christmas belief, growing stronger as more people believed. If it had escaped, it would have spread across the world, forcing everyone to believe, twisting the holiday into something horrible. Mark, Sarah, Dev, and I, we still get together for Christmas. We exchange gifts, share meals, and enjoy being with friends. It's different now, simpler maybe, but still good. Sometimes late at night, I think I hear sleigh bells in the distance, but I know it's just the wind. That's the funny thing about belief. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't holding on to it, but knowing when to let it go. I keep that red folder locked in my desk, just in case. Because even though we stopped that thing, I sometimes wonder, what else is out there, waiting to be believed in?